Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our TESS Talk. I'm delighted to introduce Danielle, who will be joining the series and contributing to the ongoing conversations of the Thinking Expansively seminar series. Danielle Eiler is a social scientist from Zurich and is currently completing her doctorate at the University of Beirut on Black subjectivities and whitened spaces in post-Apartheid Cape Town. She has taught as a lecturer at various universities, including University of Basel, University of Bern, and the University of Zurich, alongside University of Cape Town in South Africa. Alongside her academic work, Danielle is an active anti-racism education activist, and she facilitates workshops, delivers lectures, and provides consulting services to promote greater inclusion and social equity in society. She's also a curator, artist, and musician. And so we're delighted to have her, and her talk today is entitled Whiteness and Spectre in Space, the Case of Post-Apartheid Cape Town. Without any delay, Danielle, I'll hand that to you. And also just in terms of some housekeeping, that Danielle will speak for about 35 minutes, and followed by that, we'll have Q&A. And I understand Danielle has some bits of interactive discussions, so please do feel free to raise your hand, and I'll sort of chair that bit as Danielle's introducing and the interactive discussions, but also you'll have the chat enabled, so you can either raise your hand or have your chat, type it in the chat, whatever is suitable. So without any delay, Danielle, to you.
Thank you so much, Gunjan. I'm really happy and honored to be here today. Today I'm going to talk about whiteness as a spectre in space, a case of post-apartheid Cape Town. And as you know, I'm a doctoral student and I'm Big Sus Junior Fellow by International Graduate School on African Studies, like that's like long for Big Sus, and at the University of Bayreuth in Germany. And it's very interesting, like when I present myself in conferences, and many people think it's actually Lebanon, like Beirut, but actually it's Bayreuth in Germany. And yeah, Beirut would also be fine, but it's actually in Germany. So before we start with the icebreaker, I just wanted to say very quickly that this presentation is rather kind of a braver space. Maybe you know the concept of safer spaces. So like where, you feel safe, and it's a nice atmosphere, and maybe you hear what you want to hear, etc. But I think this presentation is more of a braver space, so to be courageous. So because some content may evoke negatively connoted affects or negatively connoted emotional responses. But that you have in mind that this research is supported by academic institutions. So I am guided by 3 supervisors, and 1 in Germany, and 2 in South Africa, at the University of Cape Town, and at the Rhodes University in Makanda. There, in Bayreuth, we have 3 supervisors in total, and I'm funded by the Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung and the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and of course it's backed by research and literature. So I really like to do my presentations interactively. I want to ask you, what do these pictures have in common? Unfortunately, it's a PDF, so because the PowerPoint didn't work out, but here it writes, we remember the families forcibly removed from Comitier. So that's a picture of a bench. And it's a very beautiful area. When you sit there, you have like the most beautiful view on the ocean, and it's just like also a bit touristic. But on the bench, like where tourists and people who live there then sit, it's written, we remember the people forcibly removed from this space. When you walk around the city center of Cape Town, you will read, you will see like these 2 benches, whites only, non-white only. Many people do like pictures there, take pictures there. And here you see the Adderley Street, that's the main street of Cape Town. And here it's this Ezekiel Slave Lodge, it's also touristic as attraction, where enslaved people would be kept as prisoners. So, and from there they would be go to this area, like behind like these buildings here on the Green Market Square, and there they would be sold or auctioned. And yeah, so and yeah, this picture here is like the another perspective of like the two benches, and that's like the Rhodes Memorial. Maybe you know Cecil Rhodes, and kind of people who's like there are people who say like he's the founding or one of the founding fathers of South Africa or Rhodesia. Yeah. I want to know now, as you have more information on these pictures, what do these pictures have in common?
Danielle's inviting if anyone would like to add to the chat, or
Oh,
if they would
yes.
like to raise their hand, please do feel free to.
Maybe
Your thoughts on
like
it.
the hand, so that we hear also
Yeah.
the person.
Yeah.
The microphone is fine. Like.
Okay. Yeah. Any thoughts from anyone? Lace?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to ask a question. So, is that a memorial, or do people still observe sitting on the benches in terms of your different epidermalism?
Here it's also like I think it's both. Like here it's more like there is no view, like but there are still people sitting there like to rest their feet after I don't know a day of walking through the city. But here it's definitely where you walk with your dog, or you walk and then you sit there, and like here it's very used. It's not yeah, and here it's people also take pictures, or they take video, like music video clips, they shoot here or something. Yeah.
So is there still an expectation that if you're white, you sit on the white bench, if you're non-white, you sit on the non-white bench?
No, the
No,
expectation is
okay.
not there. No, it's not there.
Thank
But
you.
people, no, it's not there.
All right, brilliant. Thank you for that.
Nice. We've got Shashi, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I was just going to ask the same thing, that in this day and age, are we still expected, if we're not white, to sit on the non-white bench? And if we did as a tourist go and sit on the white only bench, would there be any repercussions from that?
No, I think like these two benches, it's actually really like to show like that apartheid, like it's not it's a bit more than 30 years ago, right? So it's more of a like a memorial to just like remember like what happened, not a bit more than 30 years ago. But
Yeah.
actually it's more like people actually would actually take pictures in the activism way. Like if you're Black, then you sit here and then you take a picture and then you post it on Instagram, right? It's actually the other way around. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
Right. Yeah.
but thank you so much for the questions. So I think that what these pictures have in common is actually that past and is there another person who wants to
I know,
talk?
so it's just it was
Oh,
just
oh.
Bev's put in the chat around apartheid degradation as the commonalities.
Okay. Sorry, I
in
don't
it,
see.
but yes,
Oh, I don't
that's
see
all
that.
right. That's all right.
Okay. So I think what these pictures have in common is actually that past and present is like merging of past and the present, right? You walk through the streets in 2026, and you still see like what happened, right? You see like Ezekiel Slave Lodge. You walk around, and then you buy something on the Green Market Square, where you can buy some souvenirs, and you can kind of buy ice cream, and you continue walking actually through the streets where many different awful things happen, right? You enjoy maybe here in Comedy the most beautiful sunset you've ever sunset or sunrise you've ever seen in your whole life, But in this very space, a lot of trauma happened. Like families were forcibly removed, like hundreds and thousands of families. They couldn't go back. They were just from one day to the other. They had to pack their things and go somewhere else, right? And until today, they are still there. They couldn't come back, right? So you remember actually a very violent history in the presence, and that's I think one of the common things that they have, like these pictures. So I'm very interested in actually in whiteness. So it's also that the title of my presentation today actually says, right? And my like the preliminary title of my project is called Black Subjectivities and Widened Spaces in Post-Apartheid Cape Town, South Africa, Constructions, Incompatibilities, and Reactions to Exclusion. So Cape Town is a city that is very often associated with whiteness, and people would sing in songs. You can hear it in poems. You can famous people, celebrities speak about it, but activists speak about it. There are demonstrations, etc. But yeah, it's commonly in the whole South Africa known as a white space. People say that, oh no, don't go to Cape Town. It's so white. Oh, it's so, yeah. But I'm then interested in like, what is then this whiteness and where is it in Cape Town? Like, can I see, can I touch it? Can I map it? Can I smell it? Like, where is this whiteness? And if we speak of that, and how is it that everyone says the same? Also scholars write about it, like how we don't know each other, and we come from different backgrounds, have different classes, different nationalities, and still we say, yes, I also think that Cape Town is a white space, right? um yeah, and I want to know, like, how is then this whiteness, if we know what whiteness is, right, is constructed in the space, and how does it affect actually also spatial formations and also political subjectivities? Like, who are you in these spaces, right? Who do you become, or yeah, like maybe you change in these spaces, right? And vice versa, right? Like, how do these widened spaces actually change in the presence of, for instance, a Black person sitting on this white bench, or going, I don't know, in a coffee that everyone speaks about, like this coffee is a white space, or this beach is a white space, right? How does this space then change in the presence of people who are not white? So, and in my research design, like I wanted to understand actually all of that. So like, how do you do that? How should I do? Just go around and interview people, or like how can I actually understand like what, all these questions, and that really um, do something with me in terms of that interest me. So I wanted to do a research, like my methodology would be like very much of a triangulation. Like I'm in the discipline of social anthropology, so I did like a typical ethnography. So I went for about 8 to 9 months to Cape Town, and in my research design, I wanted to live in a place where in 1994, it was like, before 1994, it was only for white people. So in a formerly white area, that was my research design. So I lived in this building here in the 9th floor, maybe it's here somewhere. And this is it's very luxurious. There is like a swimming pool there and a gym, etc. So I really wanted to know, like, what happens when a Black person is in then these formerly white spaces, right? And we shouldn't forget that, of course, if an ideology like stops, right, it's over since 1994, but the buildings are still there, right? So this building was built in 1969. So it was built for people who were categorized as white. So still, they didn't just break building down after 1994. So it was built in an apartheid architecture, right? So there is an elevator that is still there, that was for Black and colored people who worked in the building. So there are still like the elevators that are separated, and the one elevator is still like back. And until today, like when I was there, it's not very luxurious, and it's now used by the Black workers who live there, who work there. And of course, there are also a lot. It's international. There are also Black and other not non-white people living there, or for Airbnb, etc. But still, like a majority who lives in this building is still white. So in my research design, I really also wanted to do like the breaching experiments of Garfinkel's, to use my Black body to understand these spaces, right? So not only like where I live, but also like to go, for instance, to a coffee, to I don't know, to a park, to a beach, to a space where my interlocutors say this space, it's a white space, and how can I just then disrupt and understand this space? Like, what does the space, how does this space changes in my presence? And then my argument with Garfinkel's ethnomethodology and breaching experiments is like the research gap that I want to close in my research is that being Black is enough for disruption. So I don't have to, I don't know, shout in a specific space, because in the breaching experiments, they would actually do as things that they would not be like stay in the norms and the social norms that are in these specific spaces, right? They would, for instance, sing in a library or something, or do something in a church where you don't do that. So, but I would always do what people do in these social spaces. For instance, drink coffee in a coffee shop, read in a park, and do what people do actually in these social spaces. And just to see like how my Blackness actually disrupts. So I would also go with my interlocutors, etc., etc. And of course, that was only part of my whole research, because I wanted also the embodied dimension, not only like the cognitive dimension, understanding. So also like the embodied. So I know, let me find out aspect, right? So now a question, and new a further question to the people who are here today. What is then whiteness? Like, how would you define whiteness, and where is whiteness, and how is whiteness? Any ideas?
I believe Bev's hand is up.
Hello, and thank you for for your talk. I'm finding it really interesting. I find it interesting that you kind of started off with Komaki, because that used to be a white beach, sort of like that whole area, and Hout Bay, Komaki, all that particular area, Noatuk, all that, so that, yeah. So in relation to what is whiteness, I actually don't know what is whiteness, because in South Africa we were classified according to various issues, such as if a pencil could stay in your hair, or various sorts of sort of things. And so and where is whiteness? Well, I don't know where whiteness is, or how is whiteness, because I've been sort of I'm classified as white, but when I go around anywhere somewhere, people are a little bit confused, because they think that maybe I'm mixed race. Okay. And the interesting thing is that my cousin did a DNA test and came back with like a lot of stuff in there that wasn't white. Okay. And I've always maintained that we were descendants from the Strandlopers, the beach the beach walkers and things. So I find those are really interesting questions, because when I did my PhD, I was looking at like, what is Blackness? What is, how is Blackness, and what is whiteness? And like to look at like what is a safe space in Cape Town is really interesting. So what is a safe space for whomever in Cape Town, because, you know, you can divide it in, because a safe space for certain groups of people is not going to be a safe space for other groups of people. So it's a really interesting question that you kind of mulling over there, and especially like, you know, I mean, I
Thanks,
spent a
Bev.
lot
Sorry,
of time.
Bev. Sorry to interrupt you, but we've got one or two other
Sorry,
hands, and
I'm
then we
gonna
want to
stop now.
progress with the
Bye-bye.
dissertation, with the chat, so the presentation. Thanks so much. We'll pick up the conversation at the Q&A. Thanks so much, Bev.
Okay.
So
Azuma, yeah. Please do unmute yourself if you like.
Muted.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I will try to answer that question by saying it's absolutely nothing and it's absolutely nowhere. Partly because I think when we think about blackness, or we think about black people, we can go anywhere from the color of steamed milk to 2 minutes past midnight, and we all fall into that category of blackness. But also in a slightly different vein, I can remember attending an exhibition in Brixton from a South African artist, in which she'd written on the wall statistics about people who had changed their racial classification. And I've never known whether this was something she had made up, whether this actually happened, or how it's possible for this to happen. But she literally had statistics. X number of people were reclassified from, you know, from white to coloured, or from coloured. And of course, whether it ever went the other way around, I don't know. So all I can say, it's absolutely nothing and it's absolutely nowhere.
Thank you so much for these comments. I want to say something to Beverly Orton. Thank you so much for your comment. And actually, Comité was categorized as a white era during apartheid. So the majority of colored population had to move. And I'll be the same. And we shouldn't forget that, you know, native population were the first there, right? So white people came there, right? They invaded the space, right? So yeah, so it's not that it was a white space and white people had to move in Comité. It's actually that during apartheid, Comité was categorized as a white area, white only area. So black people, colored community, the natives, etc., they could come there to work as a gardener, as a nanny, but they had to go back to the space where they newly were placed, right? So, and yeah, so this is also like what I want to do, like in the like to reverse the gaze, right? I want to understand whiteness from a black perspective, right? I want to do like what others have done before me. It's not like I'm the first black person doing that, but actually that's also my thing, to make whiteness visible and to understand whiteness really from a black perspective, and use predominantly black scholars in my research, or non-white scholars in my research, who before me have written and done research, etc., on exactly that topic, to make it, to decolonize also the discipline of social anthropology, but also the fields I'm working in the fields of critical whiteness studies, critical race studies, spatial studies, also memory studies, and yeah, and also among other fields that I work in. But it's like an intersection of different fields. And as I said, it's not a typical ethnography, because I really also wanted to explore, to understand also from a black perspective, because I am in a black body, right? Like what does it do also for me in these spaces, and vice versa, right? So, but thank you so much. And as you said also, Azuma, that yeah, it is a social construction at the end of the day, right? What is whiteness then? Where is it, right? And who says what whiteness is, and when whiteness ends, where it starts and ends, etc., right? Is it a spectrum? Is it an opinion? Is it, yeah, at the end of the day, it's a social construction, but that has very serious also consequences, right? So with the violence that happened, etc., like when you declare, for instance, space now a white area, right? What happens with the people who live there, right? So we know it's not an essence. It's the social construction, and many scholars have tried to define whiteness. There is not the definition, right? But it is from all these scholars, Sarah Ahmed, who writes about the phenomenology of whiteness, like from like the phenomenological perspective, right? We know it's intersectional, heterogeneous, it's fluid, it's sometimes even contradictory, right? With Frantz Fanon's black skin, white masks, right? George Yancey, Luca White, also very interesting, like this edited volume, right? The philosophical essays on whiteness. Then whiteness in the literary imagination from Toni Morrison, also from a Black perspective. Here Richard Dyer, he's a white man. Actually, he writes on whiteness from a white perspective. And so it is very complex. It is there is no the definition, and many scholars try actually to give name or their definitions or explanation on what actually Black people or experience, right, or how this world functions to have words or terminologies to describe it. We know it can be performed, enacted, embodied, felt, observed, but it can also be mapped, of course, right? With the group areas, you could see, okay, now like who lives where. You can also have like then a map of whiteness. You could have that, right? I've maybe you've questioned or you thought about like widen space. What does this mean? Why does she write widen space and not white space? So this terminology widen space was actually developed by me in collaboration with my first supervisor, Professor Katharina Schramm from the University of Bayreuth. And it describes exactly the practices, the norms, the processes that lead spaces being perceived or defined as white, and also how such spaces affect people identifying as white or as colored. So because in the literature, like as the terminology came actually when I was developing my research design and in the expose phase of my dissertation. So I would read very often white space, etc. And I was like, yeah, but how do they know it's a white space, right? It's not an essence. It's like there is not such a thing as a white space, right? It is widened, right? There are things like practices. Maybe it's a decoration. Maybe it's a dialect or an accent or a norm or the way you're treated or there is something happened or there is something in the space that make you feel that it's a white space. And this is like to make exactly these things visible. And this terminology came like into my mind that it's actually we should speak actually of widened space, right? Because without these things, you would not maybe say it's a white space, right? So these things are very important. The things that happen there, that you experience, etc., that you observe, etc., are very important for you to define that space. Oh, that's a white space, right? And these widened spaces do something. They affect people, or like whether it's white people, but also Black or colored people. But in my dissertation, I really want to know, like, how does this widened space affect people identifying as Black or as colored? So, post-apartheid Cape Town. So I don't know how many persons know not the history, but very quickly, South Africa is still extremely segregated. Like in 1994, it was de jure finished apartheid, right? But still 2026, it's still very segregated. And Cape Town is amongst the most segregated cities in South Africa. And the signs of white area, whites only have disappeared. You cannot see them anywhere, but it's still known for also, of course, there is like it's Aranya in another space where only white people can live. But in whole South Africa, actually, these signs, the visible white only white area, you cannot. They have disappeared, but still, Cape Town specifically is known for its extensive widened spaces. And just the demographics very quickly, the demographics of the national racial demographics of the country of 2022 says that Black people were like 81%, colored population like 8%, and white people 7%. And the statistics of 2017 show that white people own 72% of the farmland, right? And remember, white people are 7% of the country, and they own 72% of the farmland, like what the statistics show. It's not an opinion, it's like data, right? So like as I said, whiteness can also be mapped. So you can see on a map where are these spaces and whom do they belong to, right? This farmland. It's yeah, and in 2022, what the studies show, they still generate almost half of the total national income, and they are 7%, remember. And as a group, it's not to say that all white people are rich, like everyone is a millionaire or something, no. But as a group, white people in South Africa have actually not experienced any significant material losses since the end of apartheid. And the majority of the Black population lives actually in poverty and in very, very, very undignified conditions. And many were forcibly be removed, and they still live in these spaces, right? Although the system apartheid is now de jure over, but the apartheid landscape is there, right? So, and they were removed to these spaces where they're sandy and infertile soil. Even if you're the best gardener, it's difficult to grow tomatoes, or I don't know. Whatever, to grow anything, right? So you're forced to have a job to go to the supermarket and then buy there your tomatoes. So there is limited, like, also if you want to be like autark, like self-sufficient, it's difficult, right? How? Yeah, you do that exactly, because there is no way in your, if you have a small space in front of your house, or many other, the majority actually of the Black population also lives in houses made out of corrugated metal, also known as shacks, etc. Like, of course, not all Black people, they're also wealthy, etc. But in general, the majority lives in big poverty and undignified conditions. Achille Mbembe and Sarah Notal, they write about on that, like the Black people are like temporary sojourners, so they come to the city, like for instance, city center, like I showed you pictures, of the Adderley Street, etc., to work as a gardener, or like in this, or in suburbs, in these widened suburbs where the predominantly white people still live, to work as a gardener, as a nanny, as to go around with the dogs. That's also a job. You can have a job to that you sit, it's like a dog sitting, or many different cleaning personnel, or in restaurants, etc. But then in the evening you go back to your township. You're temporary sojourners, and your salary will not allow you to. I don't know. Your salary is costs sometimes so much as a menu in a nice restaurant, right? So your one day salary, I mean, and can cost as much as one meal, right? And still Black people still demand actually a right to the city, and it's still post-apartheid. It's de facto apartheid is still actually there. Of course, the jure is over, but justice, equity is still not achieved. And it's also known as City of Exclusion. That's written in Ruston and in Lemansky's work, but it's like this situation is citation is from Ruston, a last bastion of white rule. Paul Green writes about that, and my contribution, it's also like that. It's a city full of wide spaces, like it's a city full of very, very different how do you say, different ways and to make the city widen, right? So we know that all social spaces have exclusionary characteristics, right? So in an opera, there are things you cannot do, right? In a school, you shouldn't, I don't know, in a class, you shouldn't talk when the teacher talks, right? So there are rules, there are exclusionary things that you cannot do. And then sometimes there is like a gray area, but there are rules, right? And in widened spaces, it's like all social spaces, there is also an exclusionary characteristics, and there the spaces, some bodies or norms, practices, but also perspectives that are not associated with whiteness, also tend to be unwelcome or prohibited, right? So if you, I don't know, if you say something, or you've a certain kind of practice, or maybe it's an accent or a dialect, or some things that are not, they tend not to be associated with whiteness, tend to be excluded in these widened spaces. And this leads to the fact that it's not a very safe space for people who don't identify as white. How do these widened spaces exclude then, maybe? In my findings, my findings show that it's, for instance, economic barriers, high rents, for instance, accessibility barriers, lack of public transportation, many of the public transportation are not very good in terms of like for the township, like from the township to go to the city center, and then in the evening there is no transportation at all available, because then your job is finished, right? And sometimes on some work days, also on some days, right, on Sundays, it's less, because the transportation is like thought of, okay, when people go to work from the township to the city center or to the suburbs and then back. Another mean is, for instance, assigning security guards, racial profiling, micro or macroaggressions, like, for instance, invisibilizations. Maybe you wait for 20 minutes in a restaurant to be seated. Many people say that in my research, but also in literature, you can see that, like, these very subtle forms of humiliations. But of course, they cannot say you go away, but still they do things that make you feel that you should go away. For instance, waiting as long, and another person comes, and then this white person is seated automatically, or you want to sit in a balcony and you're not allowed, and you have to fight. And it's not like one thing. It's very very many people tell that. Some performances of superiority, social or cultural superiority, etc. There are also scholarly literature on that. So, but also through buildings, not only through that, but also through buildings, stages, streets, and place names and memorial sites. Like, you can sit, for instance, can go to a wine farm, and then you see, I don't know, pictures of colonizers on the wall, and maybe you don't feel that safe, or that, I don't know, so and maybe you won't come again back, right? Through merging of materialities and immaterialities, past and present, right, together, and also like the memory in space and the history of in space, right? So not only like the things that I say here, that I write here, but also through the buildings, the statues, etc. And so my findings actually show that, like, where whiteness is constructed in space in post-apartheid Cape Town, discomfort, fear, anger, shame, trauma, exclusion, and forced assimilation, very, very many different negatively connoted things actually also tend to be constructed, such as unbelonging, right? It's a space where I don't belong. I'm actually South African, but I feel like and the biggest outsider in this world, right? So like this feeling of being out of place, it's not really a space where you feel at ease, right? It's like a peaceful environment. It's a tense environment where you have to protect yourself. Maybe you change your accent, for instance, in a specific space, right? And you giggle, you change your voice, you're nervous, you stutter, you feel, there is fear. and there is a performance of resistance or performance of resistance. And this is also like what I observed also with my interlocutors, how they would, for instance, at the University of Cape Town, see also a Black person, Xhosa, see a friend from the private school back in the days. Also, her family, so she could get funding to get to the private school, and then she's a totally different person in these 5 minutes they talk, and I'm like, whoa, Colosa, you've so you've changed your voice, accent, how you perform, how you move, etc. It's just not a very safe space. And yeah, there is a correlation between negatively connoted affect in space and also implicit or explicit demands for action, right? So no one tells you to change your voice. It's you. No one tells you to change accent or to do this, but actually there is kind of an implicit form or demands for action, how you maybe eat, how you, the perspective what you say, how you talk, etc. So what does memory mean? Another question to you, if someone wants to talk and where are memories located, and what is the relationship between immaterialities and memory? Any ideas?
I think any
There's
thoughts
no
from
hand.
anyone as to what might be? Bev, please go on. You might have to unmute. You'll have to unmute
I just
yourself
said,
after.
sorry, it's me again. For memory in South Africa, especially maybe in Cape Town as well, it's got a lot to do with the trauma, the issues of apartheid. And there's a lot of and the coloniality, yeah, got that word, okay. And it's also to do with like repression, etc. And I think in South Africa there's still a lot of work to do with the trauma issues related to the apartheid experience. So yeah,
thanks for that. Yeah, thanks,
so
Bev.
for Cape Town, it's very much in that. And also, I do a lot of work with women in South Africa and in Cape Town, and it's interesting that you talk about Cape Town being like white, because Mbali, whom I do work with, she's now in Durban, and we're going to be meeting up in Cape Town. But she says, "Yeah, I can't Cape Town. I don't feel very welcome in Cape Town. It's very white." So,
Thanks,
so
Bev.
there's obviously
Thanks.
something in there.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop now because
Yeah.
I could talk a lot here.
Thanks. Right.
Yes, thank you thank you so much. Yeah, definitely. It's also, and there is also an article like of one of my supervisors who's in Makanda, Rhodes University, who writes about Cape Town as a post-traumatic space, right? It's still very fresh, because even if you're the born-free generation, you were born after 1994, your parents remember, your grandparents remember, and they know how the space where they before was, etc. So it is a post-traumatic space, definitely. Let me continue. So the relationship between buildings and memory, like I'm not the first person talking about that. So Greensill and for instance writes that buildings have meaning built into them, right? So the building in what I was living, in which I was living, like it's called Cartwright's Center, Cartwright's Center House. That was built in 1968. So you would walk around and you will still like see also the building of the pictures of before, etc. But also like the architecture, just the example of the elevator, for instance, right? There is a meaning in this building, right? And also there is architecture enables like the collective memory for areas, norms of life. And there is Youssef who writes about like architecture captures past and present memory. And and there is a continuity from the past into the future, because the buildings don't just disappear, right? Buildings are sometimes 200 years old or older, right? And there is, and in the history can be cast in stones, and merging of materialities and immaterialities can happen and happens. And when we talk about memories in space, Jacques Derrida, in his Spectres of Mars, the state of that, the working of Morning and the New International, he says not only like that, the buildings, they have like the memory in the like in them, you know, cast in them, but also the past ideologies, right, cannot just be effaced. For instance, if something, a political ideology stops, for instance, Marxism, it's not just a way, right? And he writes actually that Europe is haunted by Marxism, and like in after the Berlin Wall of 1989, like Marxism was still there. It also in the Euro, it was finished, right? Berlin Wall fell, but then the haunting began, right? The ideologies of Marxism actually started to haunt. Right. So with the death, with the death of communism, actually, the specter of communism actually was constructed and actually began to make visit on the earth. And I actually also go into this direction. So just as Marxism cannot be simply erased, right? And its ghosts actually continue to live on, and past violence cannot just be undone and effaced. It's not just done like that, right? So the specters of historical violence, they persist and they continue to shape contemporary societies. Right. So even though apartheid is over the Euro, right, it cannot just be a fate. You cannot just, oh, it's over. Yeah, but there is still people remembering. There are still the buildings they remember, right? So the street names, the things, you know, like there is still something happened there. It's not just like over, right? And the ghosts and the specters of the historical violence actually, they continue to visit the living, right? And there is and it's haunting, right? And the post, like apartheid is haunting post-apartheid Cape Town and the whole South Africa. And in my and I argue actually that whiteness as a spectrum can be reproduced anywhere, anyhow, and by anyone, right? And it can be embedded in stones, bricks, or sites, and sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's less visible. It can appear in any social space, right? And it makes people feel unsafe wherever it manifests. So Bell Hooks writes about, that's her argument on that's these are her words, that whiteness as the terrible, the terrifying, the terrorizing. So like that, it's not like white people, the ideology of whiteness that that automatically makes blackness bad and violent and all the negatively connoted affect. The ideology of whiteness is the terrible, the terrifying, and terrorizing, right? It can be embedded in stones and bricks, etc. It's visible and sometimes lesser, but you feel it. And this is why sometimes you perform to in a certain way. Maybe you change your accent, you laugh when it's actually not funny. It's just to be safe because it is terrifying you. Also, depending on the person, of course. And yeah, so the example here I have of this Ezekiel slave lodge, I showed you a picture where you could see it on the right side. For instance, it's not used anymore for the enslaved people. Since 1811, it has served as government offices, etc. And but still, it's still there, right? And a lot of people I know, they say, why should I go there, right? Why should I go there and see my ancestors? For what? I don't understand why tourists go to the Ezekiel slave lodge, right? Because it's not neutral to me. I see my ancestors, what they went through. So the legacies are still, it's still, you know, it's not used anymore to imprison enslaved people, but it's still not a safe space, right? There are the images, the architecture, the content, the exhibitions. Of course, there is activism there, and there are performances there to disrupt the space, but still there is still the meanings still kept, stayed kind of and somehow there, and white is entrapped into the memory in the building. So to conclude, so whatever form actually whiteness takes, it carries a history and a past, and whenever and wherever it is constructed or reconstructed in post-apartheid Cape Town, colonial legacies are also reproduced and produced. So whiteness is haunted by these colonial foundations, right? So they are whiteness is haunted by, for instance, like epochs of colonialism, but or enslavement in South Africa and apartheid in South Africa. But it's also haunting. So it's haunted, but it's also haunting contemporary spaces. So it functions simultaneously as an ideology rooted in history and as a spectral force shaping social spaces, but also social relations, political subjectivities, and also cultural imaginaries and political structures in post-apartheid Cape Town. So thank you so much.